Hi guys, and welcome to another 10, well actually 15 facts this time. It's for Nintendo's famous gorilla Donkey Kong, who has had such an interesting history that I just couldn't limit it to only 10 facts. Donkey Kong started as an arcade game in 1981, in which he was the antagonist, but has since appeared as the protagonist in several games. Donkey Kong and his extended family have also appeared in several other games such as Super Smash Bros. And Mario Kart. My personal favourites are the Donkey Kong Game & Watch that I owned as a kid, and Rare's Nintendo 64 kart racing game, Diddy Kong Racing. So Donkey Kong has been one of the biggest names in video gaming since the early 80s, but let's see if you knew all these facts. Donkey Kong was Miyamoto's debut as a designer. Nowadays, Shigeru Miyamoto is one of the world's most beloved video game designers. When he joined Nintendo in 1977 as an apprentice, the young Miyamoto worked as an artist and planner. One of his first projects was the 1979 arcade game Sheriff. The major turning point for Miyamoto and Nintendo came a year later when Nintendo's president Hiroshi Yamauchi, having seen the success of Pac-Man, told his employees in no uncertain terms, "Make games that sell more." Nintendo had made an unsuccessful attempt at cracking the American arcade market, and as a result were left with a surplus of unsold radar scope cabinets. Yamauchi paired Miyamoto with Gunpei Yokoi, the engineer who would later go on to design the Game Boy, and tasked him with making a game that would appeal more to Americans. After several years of unsuccessful game pitches, Miyamoto finally had his chance, and Donkey Kong was born. Donkey Kong originally began life as a Popeye game. For several years, Nintendo had held the license to the character Popeye, and had used it to produce various Popeye-themed items, including playing cards. Looking at Donkey Kong's design, you can see how the game would have worked as a Popeye game. Popeye's arch-rival Bluto could have been in place of the barrel-throwing Kong, while the damsel in distress could have been played by Olive Oyl. For some reason, Nintendo failed to secure the rights to make a Popeye video game, and as a result, Miyamoto had to come up with characters of his own. His idea was to create a love triangle between a carpenter, his girlfriend, and a gorilla. Nintendo did actually create some Popeye games a couple of years later, and in fact the Popeye arcade game isn't entirely dissimilar to Donkey Kong, but they failed to acquire the same classic status. Miyamoto's early ideas for Donkey Kong envisioned the action scrolling from left to right as the player avoided the rolling barrels, but hardware limitations meant that the action had to take place on a static screen. Miyamoto took the elements that he had originally intended to have dispersed around his scrolling platform game, like conveyor belts, elevators, etc., and reworked them as 4 separate levels. Miyamoto would finally get to make his scrolling platform game years later, of course, with Super Mario Bros. Mario was almost called Mr. Video. As most of you will know, when Mario appeared in Donkey Kong he wasn't yet called Mario, but Jumpman. Miyamoto later revealed that his original idea was to call him Mr. Video and have him turn up in future games as kind of a trademark, which he likened to Alfred Hitchcock making cameos in his films. Miyamoto himself admits that Mr. Video wasn't necessarily the most distinctive name. If he had been called Mr. Video, Miyamoto says, he might have disappeared off the face of the earth. Universal sued Nintendo over the name. As Donkey Kong became hugely popular in arcades, the game came to the attention of Universal Studios president Sid Sheinberg. Claiming that Donkey Kong infringed upon Universal's copyright on King Kong, Sheinberg took Nintendo to court in 1982 and also threatened all the companies who had bought the Donkey Kong merchandising license from Nintendo. After a lengthy battle, Universal lost, partly due to King Kong being so old that it was deemed public domain, and Nintendo was awarded $1.8 million in costs. A popular myth is that Donkey Kong's name resulted from a mistranslation. The title should have been Monkey Kong. Another story suggested that the name was the result of a smudged fax between Japan and the US. In reality, Miyamoto came up with the name because he was looking for synonyms for stubborn and felt that Donkey Kong would translate into the sense of stupid ape in English. In Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy Kong's Quest, there is a feature where the player is ranked alongside 3 Nintendo legends, Mario, Yoshi and Link. If you look in the bottom right corner, you'll see a sign next to a bin that reads "No Hopers" and shows what looks like Sonic the Hedgehog's shoes and Earthworm Jim's ray gun. A cheeky little dig at two of the most popular non-Nintendo characters at the time. Mario had a girlfriend before Princess Peach. The damsel in distress that Mario must save in Donkey Kong isn't the one we know from the Mario Brothers games, Princess Peach. In fact, her name is Pauline, and before that her name was simply The Lady. Her dishevelled and messy appearance was done on purpose to emulate Fay Wray, the female lead in the King Kong movie. Two shops took bananas as payment for Donkey Kong Country Returns. Back in 2010, two UK retailers, Game and GameStation, held a promotion where the first 20 customers at selected stores could get a copy of Donkey Kong Country Returns by trading in a bunch of bananas.
It's on like Donkey Kong. You wanted that fast buck, now I gotta light that ass up.
This is the first line in Ice Cube's track "Now I Got a Wetcha" on his 1992 album The Predator. Since then, the phrase has been uttered in countless forms of media. Years later, the phrase "It's on like Donkey Kong" featured in an advertisement for Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. That's because Nintendo filed to trademark the phrase.
So much adventure, it won't fit in 2 dimensions. It's on like Donkey Kong, in 3D. Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. Rated E for everyone.
Donkey Kong didn't always sport his signature red tie. He first wore the famous accessory in the 1994 Game Boy remake of the original Donkey Kong. At the height of Donkey Kong's popularity, several knockoff games appeared, such as Monkey Kong, Congo Bongo, and my personal favourite from the BBC Micro, Killer Gorilla. Tiger Electronics even released a King Kong tabletop LCD game in 1981. After their success on the NES, video game developer Rare used some of their profits to invest in Silicon Graphics workstations to produce three-dimensional models. Using this, Rare created a boxing game demo and presented it to Nintendo. As the SNES at the time couldn't render all of the SGI graphics at once, Rare used the SGI graphics to produce the 3D models and graphics before pre-rendering these graphics onto the SNES cartridge in a process known as Advanced Computer Modeling. Their progress with the 3D graphics on the SGI systems impressed Nintendo, and in 1994 Nintendo bought a 25% stake in the company that gradually increased to 49%, making Rare a second-party developer for Nintendo. Rare became one of Nintendo's key developers and had enough clout that Nintendo offered the studio the entire catalogue of characters with which to create a 3D CGI game. They of course asked for Donkey Kong. The resulting game was Donkey Kong Country, which was developed by a total of 20 people over an 18-month period. It's said that the staff visited Twycross Zoo, observing and videotaping real gorillas, although ended up basing Donkey Kong's movements around that of a horse's. Donkey Kong Country is the best-selling non-bundled 16-bit game of all time. Donkey Kong Country sold about 9.3 million units, which is insane when you compare it to modern day sales figures. These days AAA games have to sell that many just to break even. So there are my 15 Donkey Kong facts, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that there are a few that you didn't know. As always, you can leave your suggestions in the comments, and I will see you next time. Cheers!